The topic of this presentation is kinds of verbs and is from Chapter 8 of the Canadian Business English text and is actually a follow-up to the topics covered in Chapter 3 of our text. The specific objectives of this PowerPoint presentation are to help you distinguish between transitive and intransitive verbs and identify at least 8 linking verbs. Recall from our previous lessons that a verb is a word that expresses action or a state of being. We talked about verbs as being action or linking verbs. In the first sentence here, the drivers have just picked up our order. The verb picked up is an action verb. And in the second sentence, Soraya will be late for the general meeting. The verb will be is a linking verb, which describes a state of being. The first type of verb that we'll be looking at are action verbs. Action verbs will be divided into 2 types of verbs: transitive action verbs and intransitive action verbs. Transitive verbs express an action directed toward a person or thing. Transitive verbs require objects, nouns or pronouns, to complete their meaning. Have a look at the first sentence here. The government promised new business incentives. What is the verb in this sentence? It is the word promised. What is the subject in this sentence? It is the word government. When you put the subject and the verb together, the government promised, you do not have a complete sentence that can stand on its own. What we require is an object, either a noun or a pronoun, at the end of that sentence to make it make sense. So when we add the government promised incentives, the sentence now makes sense. This is a transitive verb. In the second example, Janice emailed me yesterday. The first thing we do is we find the verb, which is emailed. That makes it easier to find the subject, which is Janice. When we take the subject and the verb together, Janice emailed, the logical question that you're asking yourself is, Janice emailed whom or what? This tells you that this is a transitive verb that requires an object, such as a noun or a pronoun. In this case, the pronoun me acts as the object of the transitive verb emailed. Transitive verbs essentially transition between the subject of the sentence and the object of the sentence. So remember that if there's both a subject and an object required, then a transitive verb is the type of verb for that sentence. Let's check your skill with transitive verbs. Have a look at the first sentence here. IKEA offers free design consultations to its customers. The first thing you need to do is you need to pick out the verb, then you need to pick out the subject, and make a determination of whether the subject and the verb can stand together alone in the sentence. The verb in this sentence is the word offers, and the subject is IKEA. When you put the subject and the verb together, IKEA offers, you do not have a complete sentence. Your mind asks, whom or what did IKEA offer? In this case, IKEA offered consultations. That is the object of the transitive verb offers. Also note that there's a prepositional phrase here, to its customers. Customers is an object of the prepositional phrase, but the objects of prepositional phrases are never the objects of transitive verbs. Consider the second sentence here. Customers meet with an IKEA designer in the store. What is the verb in this sentence and what is the subject? The verb in this sentence is the word meet, and the subject is customers. When we consider the subject and verb together, customers meet, we know that we have to have an object in that sentence because it does not stand by itself or make sense. So in this case, the object of the customers meet transitive verb is designer. And one last example here. Please lay the change on the counter. Can you select the verb? And can you select the subject and make a determination of whether the subject and verb can stand together on their own? The verb of the sentence is the word lay, and because we have a statement, the subject is not shown but is understood to be you. Recall this from a previous chapter that we covered. So if we put the subject and the verb together, you lay, this does not complete a sentence on its own. What we need to have here is an object. You lay the change. Note also the object of the prepositional phrase on the counter, and don't confuse it with the object of the transitive verb lay. The next type of action verb that we'll look at are intransitive action verbs. Intransitive verbs express action but do not require objects to complete their meanings. So have a look at the following two examples. Maria walks to work every day. The verb is walked and the subject is Maria. The subject and verb together, Maria walks, is enough to have a complete sentence by itself. We cannot take the transitive verb to work and the adverb of every day as objects of a sentence, so be very careful. Maria walks by itself is a sentence. Same for the second sentence. Rod chuckled softly at the joke. The verb is chuckled and the subject is Rod. Taking the subject and the verb together, Rod chuckled, this alone can stand as its own sentence. Let's check your skill with intransitive verbs. Consider the sentence, Katie listened carefully to the deposition. What is the verb in this sentence and what is the subject, and can it stand on its own? The verb is listened and the subject is Katie. Katie listened is a verb and a subject that can stand on their own to make a complete sentence. That makes the verb listened intransitive. Here's another example. Michael left shortly after 9 p.m. What is the verb and what is the subject of the sentence, and can they stand alone? The verb is left and the subject is Michael. Michael left can indeed stand alone. Therefore, Michael left contains an intransitive verb. And one last example here. After dinner, we stayed home and watched a DVD. What is the first verb there? And what is the subject of that verb? Can they stand alone? The verb is the word stayed, and the subject is we. We stayed can stand alone, making the word stayed an intransitive verb. Don't be confused when you have prepositional phrases such as after dinner at the beginning of the sentence. Let's finish up this presentation with a different type of verb, linking verbs. Linking verbs are different than action verbs, and linking verbs are not transitive and intransitive. Those are only specific to action verbs. Recall that linking verbs link or join to subjects words that rename or describe the subjects. A noun, pronoun, or adjective that renames or describes the subject is called the complement. In the example, Gordon Vespucci is the new CEO, the linking verb is connects Gordon Vespucci to the complement of CEO. Probably the most common type of linking verb is those from the infinitive to be. Be is am, are, was, were, been, and being. As long as they are the principal verb of the sentence and not an auxiliary verb in the verb phrase, then you will always have a linking verb. Other types of linking verb reflect sense experience, such as feel, appear, taste, seem, sound, and so forth. For example, in the sentence, their new CD sounds good, the linking verb is the word sounds, and the complement is good. It describes the CD. Really, there isn't anything different about linking verbs that we're saying in this chapter that we haven't already covered, so hopefully you have a good idea of what linking verbs consist of. But let's check your skill. Identify the linking verb and complement in the following sentence. The caller could have been Jeremy. The verb phrase could have been has a linking verb of been at the end of it as its principal or main verb. This makes the sentence have a linking verb with a complement of Jeremy. Here's another example. It was Samantha who took the minutes. Consider what the verb is in this sentence and whether it is a linking verb. The verb is the word was, and the complement in this case is Samantha. And one last example and we'll wrap up this PowerPoint presentation. Later, Mike felt bad about his email to me. Can you find the verb in this sentence? The verb in this sentence is the word felt. Felt is one of those sensory verbs, and it makes this sentence have a linking verb. The complement in this case is bad. I hope this PowerPoint presentation has been helpful for you to understand the differences between action verbs and linking verbs, and also to understand that action verbs can be both transitive and intransitive.